I'm George Curtis. Welcome to It's Your Law. Each week it's my privilege to bring guests that tell us a little bit about the law that most of us maybe hadn't thought about or hadn't known about at all. It's been my privilege to practice law for more than 60 years, and I've met a lot of great people who have served the law in many, many ways. One of the most admirable ways of serving the law is to become a judge. It's not easy, it's not always fun, it's often not popular, and it's not fully understood. So when I had a chance to interview a retired judge who's not really retired, because in our profession you never retire, it's a treat. Today's guest is a special treat. She's an Oshkosh native. Her father was my doctor, a well-known doctor, an athlete. She attended school with several of my kids, practiced law here in Oshkosh, was elected to be a judge, elected again, retired as a judge, but didn't retire. She practices law, and part-time she's a poet and an author. And that's just one person, and her name is Teresa Basiliere. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, George.
Well, now you chose not to run for re-election. Then what happened?
Well, I found that after I was practicing law for 28 years before I took the bench. And I found on the bench I enjoyed the job. I liked doing what I was doing, but I missed the advocacy. And I wanted to go back to being an attorney. So I knew that that was where I was kind of drawn. My father also became ill, and I knew I would have more flexibility as an attorney to be able to spend time with him on my schedule. So it all kind of worked out in that regard to do it that way. And I am back practicing law a couple days a week. And I'm really enjoying the advocacy again that lawyers get to engage in when they practice law. One of the things I did miss when I was on the bench was that I missed being able to have that client contact. And although you meet the public when you're on the bench, you're not advocating for them. So it's a little bit of it's a big difference in relationship. And so I enjoy being back with, and I'm with a firm now, which is Belville, Bauer, and Basiliere. We're in the old Baxter's, the old restaurant in Oshkosh. It's a beautiful historic building, and that's where we're practicing.
Well, now you've had a chance to look at the legal process from the standpoint of many angles. I'm concerned, you're concerned about, is it working for the public? What are your thoughts as you look back? Do we have a system that's sick, healthy, in need of a tune-up? Give it a grade.
Well, I think it's in need of a tune-up. I do think there's things that could improve. Some of the matters that could improve probably are so entrenched in tradition that they're probably not going to change. I'll give an example. When a judge is on intake, and in Winnebago County, the judges do 2 weeks of intake where they're on 24/7. They respond to blood warrants, things such as that, get calls during the night, handle the emergencies, and a lot of interaction with law enforcement. They also handle the mental commitments and the guardianships and juvenile matters. And so there's a lot that you're dealing with in that 2-week period of time. And then you go off and you wait for the rest of the branches to do their 2 weeks, and then you rotate again. So in Winnebago County, where there are 6 branches, then you do your 2 weeks, and then the next 5 branches do their 2 weeks. So the difficulty that I see is sometimes in the schedule of a judge, you might have one hearing one day where you have 90 hearings in one day. And it's difficult to be on top of your game when you have that many hearings in one day. It's tiring. You're probably not at your best because you have been on it all day long, as opposed to it being scheduled maybe 25 hearings, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 does not work that way. And part of it, again, is the realities of this situation. When you're on intake, the law enforcement is handing out these court dates, like on traffic matters, and they're not keeping track how many hearings that you have, and then it moves to a different branch. It's just whatever comes in during that time period. So I'm always one that likes pace a little bit better, which when you're in private practice, you can, to some degree, pace yourself. There's certainly things that come up which are emergencies and they blow your whole day apart. But by and large, you can decide I'm going to schedule no more than 7 or 8 appointments a day or something of that nature. You don't have as much flexibility with that when you're on the bench. The other challenge that I think, and I know there are judges that would disagree with me, but I do think that specialty courts are a better idea. And the reason I think that is it's hard to be on your game and up on every single solitary important issue that relates to that area of the law. For example, if you are only doing family law for 5 years or 6 years or 2 years or 3 years, you become very good at that. And in Winnebago County, we have judges that we don't specialize because we're too small of a county. So it's a general, you just take whatever comes in. And so it's hard to be on top of everything on probate and on everything on personal injury and everything on family and all the different areas, and to be the best that you could be.
Hold that thought. We've used up our first 8 minutes, and we've just basically touched the top of the iceberg, and I want to revisit it after a short break. We'll be right back. About a dozen years ago, the legislature passed a law requiring alternate dispute resolution as a condition precedent to having a jury trial. That means you have to go through one of several approved forms, like mediation being the most popular one, to see if the case can be settled before we actually go before a jury. It has proved to be quite successful in many cases and very unsuccessful in others. But it gives clients an opportunity to see what the insurance company is willing to do voluntarily and appraise the costs and risks involved if we take the next step, which is have a jury decide on the value of their case. A jury trial involves expert witnesses that cost money, treating physicians and doctors that may not be allowed to testify or charged to testify. So that it's a difficult decision. If you have a professional representing you in your case, all of those factors will be discussed before and during the mediation, and you will make the ultimate decision. Is it in your best interest to take the money that's on the table and not incur further expense? Or is it in your best interest to let a jury decide? I'm a great fan of juries. Welcome back to It's Your Law. I'm George Curtis, and I'm talking to not nearly retired Judge Teresa Basiliere, who has had such a varied professional life, and I have the sense that it's just beginning. But explain the different variety of cases that judges in our generalist approach have to be familiar with to give people justice, explain to the litigants what they're going through, let them know their options and rights, and have them leave the courthouse think they had justice instead of having been had.
Well, obviously it's impossible for a judge that is in a county where you handle all different types of cases to be versed in every single area of the law. So you have to supplement that as a judge as far as doing research and getting the litigants to provide the law in the background for you. So it's different. I mean, when you are elected to the bench, you don't have typically any experience as a judge. You are sent to judicial college, which a majority of the training is on criminal law, because that is the lion's share of most of the cases that come through. But that doesn't mean that that personal injury case or that divorce case isn't as important to those litigants. It most certainly is. And so a judge does need to be, I would say, competent in those areas, which it takes a lot of continuing learning in order to do a decent job, and sometimes reliance upon the litigants, the lawyers representing the litigants, to supplement with the law. As you know, you do personal injury cases, and there's oftentimes a lot of motions for summary judgment on certain insurance issues. And I remember the first summary judgment motions that I did took me 9 hours to read through the briefs, and then to go and read the law that was that had been provided by the attorneys. And so it is a constant learning process. And my comment previously of why it's probably a little bit easier to be in a specialty court is because you kind of you're rehearing similar issues from certain days. So obviously, when it gets to a situation, an area that you do not deal with, for example, if you've not had any experience of probate and now you have to make a decision on a will contest, you have to get educated on that.
Well, you may not agree with me, but I think some of the most brilliant lawyers I've ever met were some of the lousiest judges. Because the public comes thinking, I'm right. I just want to be heard. I want to tell my story. I'm going to tell the truth, and then you'll understand that I'm right. And even if they don't get the decision in their favor, most of the public thinks, okay, maybe I wasn't right, but I finally got to tell my story, and they listen to me, and I can live with that. Now, that's a point of view that I have observed over a period of time. As you're right, I usually sue insurance companies. And I sue them because they made a promise in an insurance policy that they would do certain things when bad things happen, and they don't do it. Mm-hmm. So my conscience is clear.
Right, there you go.
But you've seen it from a standpoint of many kinds of cases, and we're here to serve the public. We're not here to buy a bigger car.
That's true.
What are your thoughts?
Well, and I agree with you. I think a lot of, it makes a big difference to the public to feel heard. And I know when I was on the bench, sometimes litigants would get into matters that were not relevant, and I'd let it go for a little bit because I knew they needed to feel heard. But as judges, you're trying to keep on your calendar as well and keep on a schedule, and it's not always easy to do that. And we're humans, and we sit on the bench. There are times where I'm sure every one of us has dealt with frustration over with certain litigants and under certain conditions. But I do think that serving the public becomes a need to listen to what they have to say, even if you rule against them because of your interpretation of the law, because regardless how you feel personally, and there were times that people would come to court and I personally felt a certain way, but the law dictated a different result. And of course you have to follow that law.
Well, it is a rule of law, and the system is constantly being changed.
Correct.
Anybody who has a television set knows how much it's being changed and how money makes things unequal Not everybody has the same kick at the cat, and that's really the ideal. We're supposed to be a democracy. We're supposed to give everyone the same chance, and unfortunately, that's a reality that's hard to capture and keep, and this is about justice, and it's why we have free elections where everybody is equal. Oh, there's a little gerrymandering, but for the most part, you have dedicated your life to being a citizen, a servant, a public servant. Your father, before you, dedicated his life to being a servant to the community. He was a well-known athlete, just a popular guy, a great doctor. He was my doctor. It runs in the family, and we're going to take another break, and I'm going to have the last segment dedicated to just a touch of your family in history, which is a lot I didn't know. I knew you as a fine person, a fine lawyer, a fair, fun judge. But now I have learned about your history, and that next segment I'm looking forward to after our next break. We'll be right back. There are many stages in the development of a personal injury case. Of course, healing is one of them, adjusting to the loss of income if indeed the injured party is incapable of working or working less. Facing the increased costs, making sure that the various insurance policies that are available pay the bills to reduce the pressure on the family, help the family deal with the adjustments they have to make and the impact on other family members because one of the family members is critically injured, building the evidence, and eventually probably filing a lawsuit, because only by filing a lawsuit can you get that case in the insurance company hands of the people capable of making a big dollar decision. Once you file a lawsuit, we get into some extended discovery with depositions, insurance medical examinations, mediations, perhaps arbitrations, pretrial, and eventually a trial. Each one is an important, critical step that has to be done properly to make sure that you get the result you deserve from your accident injuries. Welcome back to It's Your Law. I'm George Curtis, and I welcome you to hear some more from not very retired Judge Teresa Basiliere. Many people know of her as an attorney and know of the family name here in Oshkosh, which is very prominent and very well respected. They know her as a retired judge, but they don't know, and I have to admit I didn't know, she is a writer and a very successful writer. She's a poet. She's published a lot of poetry. And about a month and a half ago, when I was with a family member at the Mayo Clinic having a couple of days of checkouts, I had the privilege of reading a book she authored called The Purple Martins Sing. And it was riveting. And not only does it take me back emotionally because of some of my own experiences in life and people of color in my family and many clients that I have represented that are people of color, and the American dream has been an American nightmare, and we'll let somebody else go there. But then I discovered not only is it so well written and the feelings that she can transport to the reader about the injustice of our history, I then find out that she has genes that helped her be particularly sensitive to these issues. Her family goes all the way back to slave times and the unfairness and the cruelty in Thomas Jefferson. I'll turn it over to you.
That's correct, George. My Thomas Jefferson's great-grandfather was Christopher Branch, and that is my 11th great-grandfather. So there is a connection there, and there is a book in the Library of Congress called Branchiana, which is the Branch family coming over to the United States and establishing the colony in Virginia. And there's a lot of information that, in fact, I've done genealogy on that. I didn't find that out until probably the last 20 years. I didn't know that all my life. But my connection to the South has been since birth because my mother was from Georgia. And every year we went, starting in the 60s, to visit my grandparents in Georgia. So I remember the days of, it was early 60s, so laws had changed, but community had not changed. So it was very segregated in the South when I would visit. And because my dad was in the military, was a doctor in the military, we lived all over, and I did have exposure to other cultures because of that. So it was a little bit shocking for me going down there and seeing the segregation. There was a black grocery store, there was a white grocery store, there was a black neighborhood, there was a white neighborhood. And there was a lot of segregation from that standpoint. And as a child, my mother was very kind-hearted and very much a mom that taught us that being disrespectful to somebody because of the color of their skin was wrong. The N-word was not allowed in our house. And that was something she herself struggled with, and I remember she would share stories with us that when she was a little girl, this a little black girl that she would play with, and she was her best friend. And when her birthday came around, she wanted her best friend to attend her birthday party, and she was told, absolutely not. You can't have this little girl at your birthday party. And, you know, no amount to temper tantrum was going to change that whites and blacks did not mix. My mother, as a child, knew already that was wrong. And so despite her being raised in an environment where there was a lot of racism, blatant racism, she came out of it different. And because of that, she shared that experience with us as children. And so I've always loved that connection to the South. I don't love the connection of slavery. Obviously, it's an abomination. It's probably the worst thing in the world that can ever exist, is to own another human being. But the South in itself, I mean, I love the storytelling of the South. I love the history of the South. So there's a lot of things about the South that I love that I got from my mom. And so when I started on this book, which is a historical fiction, it's not based on my life, but there were bits and pieces of my life that I included in the book, which is things that I learned. So when you do a historical fiction, for example, you have to do a lot of research, like how do they deal with death? How do they medicate certain conditions? You have to do that research so that you can incorporate how things were done. Some of that research was done just by my knowledge of what my mother shared with me as things that occurred in her life, and I was able to incorporate some of that into the story. And that's what writers do. I mean, they draw on their own. Even if they do a fiction, they're drawing on only little bits and emotions and feelings of their own life. And my mom, being a storyteller, probably inherited that from her as far as wanting to tell stories. I've loved to tell stories from the get-go. Very early on, I love stories. I wish I would have written more things down. I dream very visually. I wish I would have written those down. I think they said Stephen King said that he dreamed a lot of his stories. I'm not like Stephen King, I wish I was, but he kind of used that visual dreaming as a way for creating stories.
The book is The Purple Martin Sing, and we're almost out of time, but I'm going to say it again, The Purple Martin Sing. It is a riveting social justice story. I've had enough miles on my tires that it's hard to bring tears to my eyes. But I actually experienced that sitting in the waiting room at the Mayo Clinic, and I could not stop reading your book until I finished it. I'm going to pass this on to your classmate, my son Eric, with my love. You're still writing, you've written poetry. How do people find out what you've written in case they want to follow through?
Well, if the book is for sale on Barnes & Noble, it is also on sale on Amazon, but you do have to put Amazon Books in order to find it. And it'll come up and you can order it from there. I'm in the process of finishing. I wrote a book before this one, which is called The Branches of Love, which is actually a story about my grandfather and I, because we really had a close relationship, and I'm hoping that I can get that published in the near future. And hopefully that will be coming out. They've been inquiring as to whether I'm going to do a sequel on this, and I'm not sure about that. I haven't made up my mind on that.
Well, keep working, keep writing, keep living, keep chronicling, and you've got so many things going. Now I know why when I visited you on your retirement and suggested you come to work here suing insurance companies, you had other things on your plate. Thank you,
George.
Thank you very much. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Ever hear the word subrogation? ERISA? Liens? If not, you need legal representation in handling your case, because there are so many contractual payers of some or part of your losses, lost wages, medical bills, for two examples, that are entitled by contracts to get their money back out of your recovery after you spend the money on a lawyer, on doctors, on a trial. They have a claim to get some or all of their money back. We spend a third of our time fighting those subrogation claims. It takes a professional. Otherwise, you take the risk, you spend the money, you win the case, and then you get to give the money back. The reason it doesn't sound fair is because it isn't. You need a pro on your side to make sure it doesn't happen to you. Teresa Basiliere, very much alive, but a life well lived. Please take a look at Teresa's book, The Purple Martin Sing. I'll bet you read it, share it, ask for it back so you can read it again. I'm George Curtis, and that's my opinion.